Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch.
Oh, and I'm Spoon Phillips.
Live!
Sorry, I was checking for some updates here. Okay.
And this episode's brought to you by our Patreon members. Join our growing community for early access to every episode, exclusive video versions of the podcast, behind-the-scenes footage, full-length product demos, and more. We appreciate you. What's happening, Spoon?
Well, here we are again. I can say that I have an authentic joy of being reunited with you, my friend, since I haven't seen you in person since Adam was a boy, it feels like. But it's good to be back, at least on the airwaves.
It's always good hanging out with you, and if I'm careful, there's probably something in there that you were subliminally telling me. That was kind of a stretch for me to try to say subliminally on a microphone. Are you asking me, are you inviting me, are you tricking me into talking about the Martin authentic guitars?
No, I was about to talk about how your current look with that beard is authentic Santa Claus in training.
In training is the key word.
Just kidding. Actually, I think it looks really good. I think you're ready for your next album cover photo, actually.
Don't you have to have the next album ready when you do that?
Yeah, you've got this Sebastian Cabot thing going on, who you probably can't remember, but look him up. Don't blame the messenger.
He better be a good-looking, cool dude when I find him online, or I'm going to be mad at you.
He had an excellent voice. So yes, authentics. We
Wait. What's that? What did he look like?
Yeah, but a terrific dancer.
That guy's personality. Right?
So yes. Yeah, authentic. We had a listener, longtime listener, request a possible topic, and Maury said we could give it a go. So it's really a sort of a return to a topic that we dealt with in the past.
Spoon, it's not often you're right, but this time you are. This is our listener, Rick. Thank you very much for the suggestion. We're going to authentically talk about what, I don't want to give away the end, but we're going to talk about a series that was much more real back when I first learned about them. But these days in 2024, is there an authentic series?
Well, actually there is. They're still listed among the series. We're now down to officially 4 models, though they are really 2 models in 2 different versions. And so these are the last authentic standing, at least for now. And they are, I bet you it's not even much of a trivia question. When you think of all of the vintage Martins that they've made into authentics, or even vintage Martins in general, and you think of what are the most famous ones, well, the most famous one I can think of would be a 1937 D28, which many people herald as the Stradivarius of flat-top steel string acoustic guitars. So it is, in fact, the D28 Authentic 1937, and it has been paired with a very recent addition to the Authentic series, the D18 Authentic 1937. So that's what's left. You can buy that in the regular Authentic series package, or you can buy it with the aged version. So the D28 Authentic 1937 aged, and the D18 Authentic 1937 aged. And that means they have gone in and what other manufacturers might call distressed these models in terms of cosmetically, but it's more than just that. So we'll talk about the aging process in a little bit. So of these, the D28 1937 actually predates the Authentic series. When Martin first came out with a guitar they called Authentic, it was a D18 authentic, and it was inspired by vintage Martins. It was not the modern version, which is taking one Martin guitar that has survived in an amazingly all original immaculate condition and using that, recreating that. And when the series first hit, when they switched from the ones they were calling authentics that were not based on a specific model and switched to one that was based on a specific model, they changed a variety of things. So the original D18 authentic, which was very quickly followed up by the 000 18 authentic and D28 authentic, and ultimately the D45 authentic, they were not based on a particular guitar, but they used a lot of guitars that they studied, and they got more authentic as it went along. Our old friend Dave Strunk of Brothers Music was on the original team that made the very first D18 authentics, and he had spoken to me about how it changed, how they changed the size of the binding and all kinds of little minutia changed over time when they were developing this stuff. Once they decided to change the whole series over to what we now call the Authentic series, where the D18 Authentic 1937 and the D28 Authentic 1937 are each as close as possible reproductions to a specific guitar that really exists out there with a specific serial number. That's when they got really cool, because that's when they took these guitars to the Smithsonian Institute and x-rayed them and put them in CAT scans and did everything they could to try to get the bracing pattern location of that particular instrument exactly in the same place. You took photographs of the bracing inside and tried to, they originally anyway, they mimicked down to the stray chisel cut, here and there, and they wanted to, but the idea that every single thing that was done to this guitar might have had some effect on how it sounded and how it played. So those are very cool, but the D28 was originally without a torrefied top. It did not have the vintage tone system. That was not even invented at that time. So that's one of the few models out there where you could have bought a torrefied version and a non-torrefied version and played them side by side, and you still can if you can find people who own them. So they came out with a variety of instruments over the years. That very first year, it was the D28 1937, a D18 Authentic 1939, which had rear shifted bracing and a 1 11/16 inch nut and a rather pointy V, where the V on the 28 was a little wider and rounder and beefier. And they also had a OM 18, 1931, I think it was, or maybe it was a 33, I can't remember now. But 33. It did not have the 33 did not have the banjo tuners. And they came out with a 12 fret D45 authentic 1936 S. And the S in those days stood for special. The original D45 that they acquired and copied remains in private hands, but it was specially ordered with a wider top and a deeper body. When they recreated the authentic one, they didn't do the deeper body, they just did the wider top. And spectacular, monstrous sound. These Rosewood Authentics were made with back and sides of?
Guatemalan?
No, the very first batch.
Oh, Brazilian.
Yes, they were made with Brazilian rosewood, which is why they cost as much as they did. And that, I think the price on that D45 was $36,000 at the time. They came back out with that. They offered that again later on with some minor tweaks to it, and it was even more expensive. And am I missing anything? I think not. I think that was it for the first year. Then they added a OM28 that was copied from Mike Seeger's famous 1931 OM28, and they did the D45, the OM45 Deluxe 1930. Those were the first two that came out with the vintage tone system. and then they started putting that VTS tops on all of the Authentics, except for the ones that didn't have a spruce top, and from then on they all were that way. Again, these are meticulously created instruments, all done with specially trained craftsmen and craftswomen, and then the letter was discovered in the archives where Frank Henry Martin was describing to someone the difference between the gloss finish on the style 45 and 42 Martins versus the gloss finish that was on the 28 and 18s. So they started coming out with the vintage gloss that is on the current ones. And I mean, it literally came down to how they hand sprayed them in those days. And basically it just really, the real secret was they didn't buff it as much. So it just wasn't buffed as much. So it doesn't have quite the glassy, see-through, mirrory sheen that you get. And so that's now authentic. And so and then the other two major tweaks is they had to get rid of Brazilian rosewood, and they switched originally to Madagascar rosewood, and then they switched to Guatemalan rosewood, and which in some respects, each of those woods have properties of Brazilian rosewood. The other one doesn't, but I'm a huge fan of Guatemalan rosewood. I think it's a much beefier, more robust, it's the French roast version of Brazilian rosewood, and as opposed to the sort of lighter, Jamaican Kenyan roast or whatever you want to call them. But it is, but then they came out with perhaps what some people feel is one of the most authentic features of all when they switched over to Guatemalan rosewood, and that was switching the body shape of the dreadnought.
Yes.
So they basically finally gave in to everybody clamoring about the fact that Martin was using the modern dreadnought shape on their Authentics. And they now have a body shape on both of these, well, really all four of these models, that is a dead ringer for 1937 D18 or D28 in terms of the silhouette of the body shape. And if you go on One Man's Guitar, my website, and look for it, you can find the drawings that Martin did for me that show you the difference between them. And it ain't a lot of difference, but it is a difference in terms of the shape of the waist and the shape of the upper bout. And and there's definitely people out there that will tell you that that's why the pre-war Martins sound the way they do, and now you can finally buy that in Authentic. So what other features are on the Authentics that you don't get elsewhere?
Well, the biggest thing that I would mention, aside from the torrefaction, because not everyone's torrefied, the hide glue construction. If you talk to our friends, you already mentioned Dave Strunk and Brothers Music. John Hall is another one that I would look into speaking with about this subject. When you build a guitar of that caliber and you want to be quote unquote authentic, and I don't think it's any coincidence they use that word because they want you to be knowing, they want you to realize, because they want you to realize you're buying a guitar that's built the way they used to build them. You can't do that with white glue. You can't do that with modern adhesives. And it's just one of those things that a lot of people that want to buy a custom instrument these days, whether or not you're going to be true to every single piece of the recipe, most of the people, when we were still a dealer, that would be talking about, I want to get this done the right way, hide glue was the first request. So when you talk about hide glue construction paired with the way that they're being very literal about, and if you look at that onemans.com, one man's with a Z, by the way, you'll see those pictures. Because it's such a small difference, just reinforces how literal and how serious Martin's being about getting it right. Because let's be honest, if you didn't see that first picture, would you ever think a 2021 authentic Martin doesn't look right? I mean, it's a very, very small difference, especially in the waist. But I think hide glue construction, I would go on record to say that's probably the most important part.
Well, you would say it's a very small difference. It's a very small population out there who thinks it's a big difference, put it that way. But yes, people who want to have that. Yes, hide glue, hot hide glue. There's a lot of debate about this. Plenty of luthiers out there that say, it's nonsense, because they don't want to do it. So they're the first ones that want to say, I want to charge $10,000 for this small shop guitar, but it doesn't have a hand-fitted double neck joint, and it doesn't have hide glue, and it doesn't have, cetera, et cetera. But because in their mind, there's no, you're not going to hear any difference. So yes, it is special. It's a pain to work with. It's got to be refrigerated. It's got to be heated up. It smells terrible. I mean, it's made from a dead animal skin. So, and it's, but the way that it bonds with wood, the way that the bond between the two pieces of wood is the way that it doesn't crystallize in the same way that tight bond, the modern white glues do, that this all comes down to an alchemy that has just convinced too many people that the energy transference from that piece of wood to that piece of wood, when it's passing on those vibrations that ultimately are going to be creating the sound waves, there is a difference. And however, there's another one that goes with that, and that's the thin finish. The authentic, serious thin finish is not just as thin as they would have really sprayed a 1930s Martin. It's even thinner. So it accounts for it. It's way thinner than they could have done it back then. But the point that was explained to me was that what they're trying to mimic is they're trying to mimic a 1930s Martin today. And like a mint condition 1930s Martin today. So they're giving you the finish thickness that you get today from those amazingly resonant, alive guitars. And so in that respect, that's one of the things that's even, in a way, even more authentic, at least in their eyes, that the finish is actually even thinner than in terms of the microns. I don't remember now, but it's a very small number of microns thick. Mm-hmm. The caveat of that is it scars more easily. You can scratch it more easily. It's pick scratches. You're gonna, the wood bruises more easily. So you'll get not just scratches, but when you get like a ding, you'll see it sets down into the wood more and all that. Just like a real vintage guitar, it's hard to find a vintage guitar that doesn't have that stuff all over it. So so that's one caveat, and it'll cloud more easily, and so you've got to be careful with your humidification in terms of just how dense the steam from your radiator is or whatever, though the cloudiness will eventually go away eventually. But so those two in combination, that thin finish definitely matters in tone production. And fortunately, both of these are available from the custom shop, so you don't have to buy an authentic to get that feature. Before we jump into that, so can you think off the top of your head of the authentic models over the years that you thought were coolest, or that you thought were that you wished you could have, or anything like that?
I'll go in reverse order. That I wished I had all of them. The one that I remember the best, I probably, and I wanted to get this answer ready because I was expecting you to ask me that, and I was expecting you to ask me that because the person who asked for this episode said that too. Let's mention our favorites. I'm going to do a little bit of revisionist history and tell you that for the longest time, the OM45 was my favorite by far. And that was really definitely true the time we had it here in the shop back when we were a dealer. But the first OM that I really got my hands on it, and I still remember this to this day, and I'm not a parent, and I know Tim Teal, but I was not with him when his daughter was born. But I'll bet that he was almost as proud when he first showed me the OM28 Authentic. If you go to Martin, depending on what year you're there, certain rooms are where they are, and then that room is not that room anymore. But where the one meeting room was, like a conference room, he said, let's get out of this noisy lobby, and I want to show you something. I will never forget my first and second impression of the OM28 Authentic when it was just a prototype, and that. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was definitely a torrified top. Tim Teal handed me the OM28 Authentic and then just already expected my reaction and was smiling for my reaction before the reaction happened. And it was just this, everything, the guitar players always make this analogy or this comment when you play guitar, whether it's amplified or electric or acoustic, you have a sound in your head, what you want something to sound like. And just strumming on this, just basic strumming, on the OM28 Authentic has stayed with me all these years. Now that I'm removed 5-6 years away from having the OM45 in the shop, I remember the OM28 Authentic, and I probably have to say memories of hearing our friend Stan at NASFest play his That's the one that comes to my mind now. After Time Away, I think the OM28 Authentic is my favorite. It's a long way around saying how I feel.
Well, that's pretty cool. I remember both of us playing it at that time, and I still have a video of you doing Warren Zevon's seminal bingo on it, as a matter of fact. But maybe that's actually, I'm sorry, that may have been a real vintage Martin. There were very real vintage Martins there as well. But I do have video of you playing Stan's guitar. Yeah, it may have been. Yeah, yes, and that really answered an important question, because technically, when you torrefy a top, it's not going to break in anymore. It's not going to break out in the sense of aging 50 years and all that inherent moisture, drying away and all of those formerly alive cells and cellulose crystallizing, and which is all part of why vintage violins and vintage guitars sound the way they do. So it's not going to improve in that respect. But it was so obvious when he brought that a year later and the year after that it definitely was improving in tone. It was definitely opening up. It was definitely becoming, the detail in the harmonics and the sympathetics and all that stuff. So yes, I got to be there a lot through that process. I got to play the Seeger's OM28, and I was there the day that they put that contraption on the neck and found out just how incredibly different the neck shape was between the 1930 OM45 Deluxe and the 1931 OM28, and just showing how hand carving really mattered back then in terms of no two Martin guitars being exactly the same. And I know, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they felt like they finally made it to their mountaintop. So it's interesting that they took these dreadnoughts even farther by changing the shape of the body, even by that little bit that they did. And I don't know if it was, a way to attract people to this guitar now that they're switching Guatemalan rosewood, but I think the new D28s sound fantastic. It is it's a victory for people who like the big fat V-necks, that they got rid of the other D18 Authentic and came out with the D18 Authentic 1937. After finally getting their hands on a real 1937 D18 that they felt was worthy of being copied. And but there's been some other really cool instruments out there. I'm a big fan of the 0017 Authentic 1931, which is a non-torrefied mahogany top. I'd forgotten how much. I didn't get to see that much in those days. Yeah. But a good friend of mine acquired one recently, and he's a classical guitarist, but he still plays some steel string instruments, and it's he just loves it to pieces. For people who don't know, there was no such thing as a mahogany top 15 in the old days. It was only the 17s, and anything that says 15 on it in those days would not have had a mahogany top. It wasn't until the 015 came out in 1940, I think, that they put a mahogany top on a 15. So you got the 0017, 12-foot 0017 was and smaller bodied 17s were the main mahogany topped instruments. So that's very cool. The 0030 1911, I think it is. It's the 1911, 1919. But this is a very early example of a 12-fret tripolo, and it's in a style 30. That style 30 changed a lot, but what the hallmark of style 30 and style 34 was that instead of having pearl inlay, it had colored wood marquetry, like very bright red, green, yellow, blue marquetry. And they a lot of that marquetry wasn't in existence in the modern times, but they purchased some of it so they could make the OM30 Pat Donahoe signature model. And so they basically used similar stuff for that. But it's got unique fingerboard markings on it, and it also has no neck support. So for those of you who are not our high-level Patreon members, we just had some technical difficulty. So I'm basically picking this up where I left off. And the 0030 style 30, really cool instrument, lightly built, super responsive. Big neck, big string spacing, but not particularly thick neck. Martins in those days actually didn't have the big thick necks that you get from the vintage instruments in the 1930s, like that D45 authentic 1936S, which has a mammoth, the deep, thick neck.
Let me stop you there, Spoon. That's a good point. When we talk about things like the Standard Series and we talk about the 15 Series, we can say what kind of necks they have. That's not a blanket statement you can say about the Authentics at all.
That's correct. They're all unique. They're all basically V-necks, but the OM45 Deluxe from 1930 has a shockingly shallow, super comfortable neck. And they did a good job. I won't say it's exactly the same. That's one thing they've never really been able to do for me when I play them side by side, and I've played a great many of these Authentics directly side by side with the guitar that they're copying. And they don't sound exactly the same. They don't feel exactly the same. They don't vibrate exactly the same. But they also cost about a third of what those priceless instruments cost. And you're still getting a lot of trade secret stuff that no one else out there knows. They did leak one fairly recently with the release of the HG28 Oahu. That's based on a unusual pre-war Gibson body shape, a Hawaiian guitar that's shaped a lot like a early Martin Dreadnought, but a much smaller body. They're about the size of the CEO7s. And the authentic fingerboards for the Authentic series, they're thinner than standard fretboards, but they also have a different shape to them in the way that they come off and curve over. And it's a little bit of a roll-off that Martin had never allowed people like me to talk about. It's one of those things we weren't allowed to talk about. But they blabbed about it in public themselves, so I'm allowed to talk about it now. So little cool things like that are unique to the Authentic series. The shaping of the bracing. Originally, they were trying to absolutely copy the bracing of that actual guitar. I'm not sure they go to that length now, but they do certainly in terms of the exact placement of the bracing, in terms of the footprint of the bracing pattern on the top. And they also carve the bracing all the way down to the soundboard, where you don't get that with anything else but the Authentic series. So there's, everybody else is having the tops scalloped. They're scalloping the tops and shaping basically they're shaping this all the way down. And sometimes it's skinnier down here than it is up here, just like this microphone is. Sometimes it's shaped more like a bullet, and it really depends on the actual model and which brace or tone bar we're talking about. But a lot more effort goes into it before it goes out the door. 0042, super cool. The 0042 used to be owned by Kenny Sultan. Sorry, Kenny. That was owned by Kenny Sultan, but he needed to build a house, so he sold it. And 0042, very rare model, very cool, 14 fret, made famous by Eric Clapton on MTV Unplugged. And I think Kenny's was a 38. I think Clapton's was a 39, but still super cool. And these are I like these different models for different reasons. The OM45, as you said, is out of this world, but it was also priced out of this world. I think it was priced at $50,000. So it was fun to be able to play them when I could. If I could buy one, it would probably be the D28, except I already own a Brazilian rosewood, Martin back and sides from 1966 that our friends at Brothers Music retopped with a 1930s, authentic 1930 authentic top. So yeah. I never did get around to buying an authentic instrument. But it might be that little 00 with the mahogany top. That might be, that's I think one of the coolest ones because it's very modest in its appointments, and it's just light as a feather. And that's there's a lot out there. But then I got to give a shout out to the D28 Authentic 1941. It's the first modern Martin made with true rear shifted bracing. It had a very comfortable 1/11/16 inch neck, not nearly as pointy as the D1839. And I really thought it was the best sounding Martin of that first year. I just loved how focused. It was deep and rich, but it really focused top notes that you get from rear shifted bracing, just like that D28 Rich Robinson, which was basically an authentic model because it was taking his dad's 1954 D28 and recreating that, and that's why there's really only 4 models left now, because they're moving into doing these models based on celebrity models. So they did the Rich Robinson. They'll probably do others, and then of course the Bonamassa.
Nice, well done.
Thank you.
Joe is the name you can't think of now.
Joey Bonamassa. They just came out with his signature model. That is essentially an authentic model. It's an authentic 00045 build, and just super cool, of a mint condition 00045 from 39, I think it's 39.
I think so.
But yeah, so that's kind of the road they're going. They're using everything they learned through this process of making the authentics. I would never turn down, and I would recommend anybody, if you see one of the original authentics for sale, especially the D45, of which they made very few, it really was a close copy of the 1942 D45 that's in the museum, even though it didn't go through the Smithsonian, X-ray and CAT scan and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But 1/11/16 inch, not at width, just spectacular guitar. Not BTS, this is all before BTS, but hide glue, thin finish, just magnificent guitars. And but they only made a few of them, so congratulations to you own one. And then the other reason that we don't have a lot of authentics now is because they allow you to order them from the custom shop. With very few things, there are certain things they won't tell you that you can't get. And there's things that you may know about that they'll say, no, you can't get that. But for the most part, you could go to a custom shop dealer, and it's got to be a custom shop expert dealer. It's their deep pocket dealers that are allowed to order these. But and they offer these special custom shop dealer models that are essentially an authentic D28 1937, with the exception of a modern truss rod and the exception of Indian rosewood back and sides. But you can get that in 000 now. You can get a 0018 and a D18. They're really close to authentics for a lot less money. And so check them out. But you can customize them any way you want. I mean, if you want a picture of Grandpa Simpson on yours, you can do that. And
because that was the style at the time.
Thank you. Yes, good man. I used to wear an onion on my belt. That was the style at the time.
I won't try to do his voice, but in my head, I'm doing his voice.
I'd like to say I accidentally gave away Maury's Christmas present, but unfortunately, I can't afford to get him a authentic with Grandpa Simpson's picture, hand painted by our good friend Robert Getzel.
I'll do that, though. I'll send him a message later today, all totally serious. Could you please, now that I'm not a dealer anymore, could you please, connect me with this guitar? And how tricky is this artwork? And I'll see what he says. But you brought up something earlier, and I'm not one to go into an episode like this and think that I have one up on you, but I think there's a really cool guitar you haven't mentioned yet. And if you're still listening to us, you'll remember in the beginning of this episode, this whole topic was asked about by our good friend Rick in a comment section, and he asked us to name our favorite authentics. I'd like to do a section B. Can we also name our favorite authentics based on appearance?
Well, I think I kind of did. I think that 0030 1911 was probably, I think, super cool. I've always loved that bright wood inlay. Which one would you say?
I'm thinking of, you mentioned a video earlier where you had a video of me playing Stan's 28 authentic. I've got a video of you somewhere in Maury's Music playing 3 Koa-topped authentic guitars.
Oh, the 28. Oh, the 0028 Koa. Is that the one that's is that 1917, 1919? I can't remember what year it's based on anymore.
I don't remember either.
21.
But they were
It's a 1921.
looking.
It's
Weren't they gorgeous?
1921. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Now, they experimented with trying to torify koa, and they failed. It kept cracking on them. So that was the first authentic to come out after they introduced VTS that didn't have a VTS top. They might be able to torify koa now, too, because they are able to torify mahogany now, I believe. So they don't do the backs and sides and stuff, but they could do a soundboard possibly. But yeah, those were super
pretty.
cool. Yeah, those are super cool, and those had a, I'm pretty sure, wooden rod in the neck. Yeah, it had ebony rod, like the 1930 OMs did as well. Or maybe they didn't have a rod too. I forget. Maybe that was the Triple O that didn't have a rod that scared people away. But at the same time, I know people who own those instruments and have not had any problem with those necks. But yeah, those were wonderful guitars. And in fact, my friend, I was really hoping he would run into one someday so he could play it, because he might have bought that over the 0017, though I guess the 0017 is closer to his classical guitars in size. So, but yeah, that's a super guitar. It's gorgeous, just gorgeous instruments. Good call.
Thank you.
We'd be curious to hear from our listeners through email, or if they want to go on the YouTube version of this podcast to mention what were their favorite authentic models, which ones we haven't mentioned that you feel should have been mentioned. And I know I'm missing a real cool one too, and I can't remember what it is though. Can't remember what it is. They're all interesting. They're all unique. They're all really great guitars. I know there are people that nitpick, that own the genuine articles, that will nitpick about this not being the same. Again, that the waist is slightly different and the shoulders are slightly different than my 1936 or 37 Martin. But again, for the price, you just can't beat them. They're so well done. Not everybody likes the aging thing. But the aging thing, I said I'd mention this again. The aging thing isn't just about putting some nicks and dings and where where the thumb would go along the edge, like they do, and that's all done by hand. Every single one of them is still done by the same people. But they do something to the lacquer to inflict a bunch of finish checking in it. And there's a lot of people that believe that the old Martins that have finish checking, where the lacquer had been exposed to sudden changes in temperature, so that it has all these minute little cracks in them. So if you look at them with a magnifying glass, it almost looks like maybe a stained glass window or something, even though the color is not changing. That you see all these micro cracks. They believe that actually allows the guitars to move and breathe better. And anybody who's played the modern satin D20 and satin D18 compared to the standard gloss, you can feel this. You can get the similar effect where the gloss feels like it's really hugging that guitar and forcing the sound out that way. Where the gloss, the satin ones, it's like it's not doing that. It's not hugging it so much, and they're free to vibrate out and radiate tone outward. So it's a interesting. It's a different sound, and there are people who say that the aging lacquer that cracks like that and has been played for years and years to the point that it's cracked all over like that, is supposed to improve sound, and these aged models actually have an accelerated version of that. So it's almost like a vintage tone system lacquer in addition to the top and to what they do to the spruce tops. So
That's true.
I've never seen any scientific evidence of this, but I would think it would be pretty cool if somebody had that kind of equipment and would like to gather some of those guitars and play them and see. And let us know at Martins and More.
I have good news. I was actually talking to scientists today, and for every one scientist that says that does make a difference, there are 20 that disagree.
So, and I'm assuming the scientist you speak to is the one that's impersonating Jerry Lewis on The Simpsons.
You assume correctly. Why don't we take a moment and play a great game of 20 questions?
20 20 questions? You mean the game where one of us, in this case, the smart guy, being Maury, picks a Martin guitar out there, and the wise guy, being Spoon, has to guess what Martin guitar that's still in production today is he thinking of. And I get 20 questions plus up to 3 guesses, not plus, up to 3 guesses of what model it is, and they count toward those 20 questions. And obviously, I mentioned it's got to still be in production, which greatly limits his choice of authentics in case he was going to try to pull a fast one.
He was. All right, 20 questions on the clock, and go.
Is this guitar made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Is this guitar a dreadnought?
Yes.
Is it a 14-fret dreadnought?
Yes.
Is it a square-shouldered dreadnought?
Yes.
Does it have a spruce top?
Yes.
Is the spruce top tarified?
No.
Is it in the standard series?
Yes.
Does it have scallop bracing?
Yes. Now it does.
So, it's got mahogany back and sides, does it?
It does. Smarty?
Does it have a satin finish?
No.
Oh, so it's the standard D18?
Yes.
I thought you were going to pull a fast one. You got me on those satins before. So,
Yeah,
you got me on the
that's
D28
true.
satin.
You got me on a lazy day. Congratulations, Spoon. I appreciate you recognizing that I might have gone and pulled an authentic, and since I know that you know that I know I might have done that, I didn't do that, and I think since you knew that might happen, that's why I stayed in the standard series.
Thank you, Steve Carell, for that explanation.
You're
and
welcome.
and I guess my trivia question that doesn't have an answer yet is, are they going to make a D35 satin, and if so, when?
I won't say that I was thinking about that today, but a few episodes ago, I was going to ask you that off camera and forgot. They didn't take that satin versus gloss, anything you want to do in the standard series, very far at all. When they did what they did, was it maybe 3 years ago now, and we had the opportunity to play them, you can get more than a couple models in regular version, satin version, and satin amber. And I was, as a dealer and a player, waiting to see, not to pick on anybody, but if you want to have new models come out at NAMM time and have a new product launch every so often, you could ride that train a long time before you spend any real R&D. I mean, they could take, hypothetically, if they want to take every 6 months and add 2 more models to the standard series with that treatment, I really am surprised they haven't.
Well, part of this is they also decided to use the painted tops that basically represent a relict instrument. So the D18 satin was given the top of Kurt Cobain's D18, and that sort of thing. So maybe they're saving it for that sort of treatment as opposed to just satin, offering satin finish and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to do exactly what you're talking about over time. But it also depends on how well they sell. If they have 800 dealers out there saying nobody's buying these things, we don't want to buy any more of those, then that tells Chris something.
That could be.
And maybe he'll say, okay, let's hold off on that. Maybe now's not the time. Maybe there's certain aspects about the economics of the world market right now, or inside the United States, supply chain stuff about the materials used. So I'm not going to. I will not be surprised if we don't see more and more standard series satin models coming up. That's why I brought it up. And I was just thinking doing an A. We got to do the A/B between a HD28 and the D28 satin and the D18 and the D18 satin. So it'd be fun to do that, to see with that 1/4-inch bracing of a D35 or the scallop 1/4-inch bracing of an HD35.
Yeah.
Just what that extra openness you get from the satin finish, what that will do. So
Write your congressman and make sure they do an HD35 satin so we can get our mitts on it and tell you what we think you should do with it. But that really would be, now you have me thinking about, well, I won't say I'm thinking about buying one, but you have me thinking about playing one. So keep that on your radar. One more time, thank you again, Rick, for the really fun topic episode. Please let us know in the comments, if you are on YouTube, what you thought about this episode, and give us maybe some suggestions for future episodes. And if you're watching the Patreon version of this, thank you so very much. We really do appreciate your support, to the point we must say this program could not happen without you. We don't have a sponsor. We are not run by Maury's Music. This is a grassroots thing now, so we do appreciate our patrons because they are the ones bringing you this program. If you'd like to join them, you're definitely invited. And from all of us at Martins and More, thanks for listening.
hear you later.